Yeah, so concept number one, and very, very important when it comes to designing responsive web pages is the viewport meta tag. Remember, we mentioned this in passing when we are going through some of the meta tags. The viewport meta tag, that one is a very, very crucial piece of concept when it comes to responsive web design. So this particular meta tag simply notifies and tells the browser how to control the page's dimensions and scaling. How to control the page's dimension and scaling. You're simply informing the browser that what I am presenting to you, I want to modify the scaling based on some set conditions or some certain criteria. So the browser will be informed and therefore be ready for whatever you might have and present to it. So the viewport is very, I think we went through the, I think we went through the syntax. I think we went through the syntax for the viewport. You simply have the meta tag with the name, with the name, the content type, the content, sorry, the name viewport and the content where you have the width, which is set to the device width and with an initial scale of 1.0. That is just the default scale. It is neither zoomed out or zoomed in. It is just set to 1. So that is the purpose of that. It simply informs the browser that you intend to control the page's dimension and its scaling. That is concept number one. Very, very important. With that, without that line of code, you will not be able to design and develop responsive web pages. Because once that one is missing, the browser will not know how to display your web pages in terms of responsiveness. Number two is what we refer to as fluid layouts. Fluid layouts. So when it comes to fluid layouts, fluid, you all know fluids, things like water, uh, items that are in a liquid state, things like water, oil, and so on and so forth. So when you pour a fluid into a container, either a round container, cylindrical container, or whatever shape of a container, the fluid will take up the shape of that container. And when it comes to responsiveness, this is one of the concepts that we are going to apply or look into, the fluid nature of elements, such that elements can take up the shape and size of other elements or relative to other elements within your web pages. And how do you as a developer achieve fluid layouts? You simply achieve that by the use of relative units of measurement. Use of units of measurement. By units of measurement, these are units of measurement that depend on other elements or other items in order to get their own sizes. And we are going to see this practically, and I will explain more on that. And these relative units of measurement are things like percentage or EM. You have percentage or EM. We have percentage or EM. Pixel is an absolute unit of measurement. That one is defined. It is absolute. You can actually measure it. You have EM, you have RM, you have W and VH. VW and VH. That is view width and view height. So those ones are examples of relative units of measurement. And you can use them when it comes to fluid layouts. Let's just finish up with the concepts and then we can showcase them one by one. Next is flexible images. Flexible images. Remember the tough time we had when we were interacting with images in week 2 of our of this particular course, where we had to adjust the image width and height using attributes on the image element. Yeah, so with flexible images, you can still use the same relative units of measurement in order to make the images much more flexible. But with this one, we mostly rely on the percentage. We mostly rely on the percentage units of measurement, relative unit of measurement. So flexible images, these ones enable you to scale an image within its containing element, or whether it's still not within any containing element. You are able to scale that image and thereafter maintaining its aspect ratio, such that when you download images, you do not have to edit and crop them so that you ensure you have the perfect size that fits into your design. No. So with the responsive web design, you can introduce flexible images that will conform to the different structures and layouts that you would have defined. And lastly, the last concept that we will be looking at is media queries. Media queries. Media queries. How would you define a query? Would you define a query, if I may ask? How would you define a query? In your own layman understanding, how would you define a query? You can just post for me on the chat box. How would you define a query? And ask. Very nice. Thank you. Request for information. Question. Word seeking an answer. A request. A filter. Very good. Questions. Statement that seeks to perform a certain task. Retrieving info. Now we're just defining a query. A query, just a query, not a media query. Just a query. Just a query. Looking for specific information. Very good, very good. A request to get specific information. Yeah. An action requesting for specific task operation. Yeah, all very valid, all very valid definitions of the word query according to how you understand it. So when it comes to media queries in web development, and especially so in responsive web design, you're simply requesting information from the browser regarding certain aspects of the device, such that if you know this information, then you can modify and change the user interface or the function of the web page or a website. That is the purpose of a query. That is the purpose of a media query. You simply requesting the browser for certain aspects, certain information regarding the device that is currently accessing a web page, so that you know how you will respond or what you will change or alter depending on the information that you get. Okay, that is the media query. So media queries will simply help you as the developer to apply different styles depending on certain aspects. And these aspects are things like the screen size, the screen resolution, the screen orientation, and so on and so forth. And the syntax of a media query looks something, syntax of a media query looks something like so. Sorry, excuse me. You have your keyword media, and then you have what we refer to as the condition. And after the condition, you have your curly braces, and within your curly braces, you will define the CSS rules as you would normally define CSS rules on a CSS file. Okay. So, for example, you might have a condition to style only uh, screens that have the landscape orientation, and your rules would apply to things like background color or change the font if the orientation is in landscape, or change a background photo, and so on and so forth. So using media queries, you are able to target specific aspects of the device. You're able to target specific aspects of the device and alter the outlook of these aspects, the outlook of these devices based on the condition that you have targeted. So we are going to see this practically. We are going to see this practically. So let us switch to Visual Studio Code Editor. I want you to create two files. I want you to create two files, HTML, an index.html file, and a style.css file. I want you to create those two files. Very quickly create those two files. On the index, I want a very simple and basic structure. Structure very, very quickly. I know you have this at the tip of your fingertips, at the tips of your fingers, because we've been doing this for so long. It should come very natural to you by now. It should come very, very natural to you. So for my title, I will. What is funny? Yeah. Because I'm saying it becomes natural. Yes, it should. You are aspiring web developer. Some things should not be difficult to you by now. Creating a basic structure of a web page, that one should come very naturally by now. We are in week 4. Mm, we are in week 4. Okay, so having your basic structure, I want you to place a div container. I want you to place a div container, and I want you to have this content within the div container. Okay, now that content within the div container. I also want you to have an image. Please at least have one image. Please at least have one image. to our website that you can download free images from. So maybe you can have a look at pexels.com. Just get an image, any image. We want to showcase these three concepts. No, four. There are four concepts when it comes to responsive web design. So you should have something of this, like this. You should have something like this. You should have something like this. Simple structure. You have your declaration block at the top, followed by the root element, head section with a title within it, body section with a div container. And the div container has H1 heading and two paragraphs. After the div container, you have an image. You have an image. So first things first, we need to define our meta tag. First things first, we need to define our meta tag. This is the only way we can ensure our browser will correctly scale. That is the only way we can ensure our browser will correctly scale and display our web pages according to the different dimensions that we will be defining. So define the viewport meta tag. Define the viewport meta tag. Very important. Number two, we actually forgot this in the afternoon's class. We need to link our style sheet. We need to link our style sheet. Also very important. Otherwise, our style will not be displayed. Our styles will not be displayed. I hope you created a style.css file and you have linked it to your HTML page. Yeah, so we've already linked our meta tag. Number two, we look at a fluid layout. We look at a fluid layout. So let us give our div a class. We can give our div a class. We can give our div a class. Give our div a class, and then we will head on to our CSS file. Head on to our CSS file. Head on to our CSS file. So in our CSS file, we're going to reference the class container. Going to reference the class container. And for this one, we're going to simply set the width to, let me set it to Let me set it to 80%. And for this one, I want the margin to the left. I want the margin to the left to be 10%. 10%. Let us put a background color. Oh, looks nice. Put a background color. Oh, I haven't gotten an image. Let me do so. Let me do so. Uh, I have my image, I have my div container, and I have my CSS rule to create a fluid layout for my div container. So I'm going to save that and then launch this in a browser. Save that and launch that in a browser. It to reach the other side. Let us see. This picture is too huge. Let me just get rid of the picture for now. Yeah, so that is something I wanted us to see. That is something I wanted us to see. So that is our div container. Its background is set to the color coral. And as you can note, it does not span the entire web page. Why? Because we have put its relative position as 80%. And what does this 80% mean? So what has happened is the browser, when receiving this file, this index file, it has noted the entire width of the device screen. In this case, my laptop screen. So the entire device screen, and then it has taken 80% of that size and given that size to the div container, and given that size to the div container. And that is where the relative unit comes in. The relative units in CSS or in web development actually mean this item or that element that you have defined using the relative unit. That element is that particular size relative to another element within the web page. And in this case, the other element is the screen size, the entire screen size. And here we are only looking at the device width. So the device width of my laptop, or in your case, your laptop or your device screen, is taken into consideration, and then the browser takes 80% of that size and now grants it as the size of your div container. That is where the relativity comes about. And also, remember, we also set the margin to 20%. We also set the margin to 20% on the left side. And that is why we have this space That is why you have this space on the left side. So if you add the two, it will span 100% of the web page. If you add the two, 80 plus 20, you get 100% of the web page. And you can always play around with these numbers to actually achieve what you want. To achieve what you want, you can play around with those numbers. So I wanted it at 20% for some reason. So I'll just let it stay there. I will let it stay there. Let me use live server. This one is much better. Live server is much better. Live server is much better. So let me reintroduce my image. Oh, we haven't showcased the fluid layout. Sorry. I want to showcase that one first. I'm doing everything I've done. Now, to see the power of the fluid nature of this layout, we are going to open the developer tools in our browser. So what I want you to do is right-click anywhere on the page, right-click anywhere on the page, and on the context menu, select Inspector. So there is a different page that will load. There is a different page that will load. These are what we refer to as the developer tools. This is where you can increase your productivity as a developer. There are various tools and features that you can use to analyze and get the most of a browser and how your web pages appear, the look and feel, and also the functionality, and so on and so forth. So for this particular session, what we are interested in is the display. What we are interested in is the display, and specifically the device toolbar. So the device toolbar is this particular one. I don't know if you can see my cursor. This particular one, the icon looks like a laptop and a mobile device. So you can click on that one. You can click on that one. Click on that one. So this will reload your web page on a separate window to your left. And this window, this is where we can play around with the width of our display. We can play around with the width of our display. So the first option at the very top, right below the address bar, is the dimensions. So we can set this to responsive. We can set this to responsive. Just set it to responsive. So you can manually change these numbers. You can manually change these numbers as you wish. You can manually change these numbers, or you can simply drag the display. You can simply drag the display. And I hope you can see the fluid nature of our container. Can you note the fluid nature of our container? The contents adjust accordingly and the size adjusts accordingly to the device width. And that is what we are referring to as fluid layouts, such that contents and other elements can automatically adapt to the size of the device width. So that is concept number 2, fluid layouts. And the beauty of this device toolbar is you have a list of pre-selected devices that you can select and see how your web page would look like on those devices. For example, I've selected iPhone SE. That is how it will look like. I can even change the orientation using this rotate feature here. You can change the orientation from landscape, that is this is portrait. This is portrait to landscape, and from landscape to portrait, and so on and so forth. So that is how you can test the fluid nature of, or even the responsiveness of your web page straight from a browser. Okay, so that was fluid layouts. That was fluid layouts. Was fluid layouts. I'm getting notifications here. Let me stop them. So I'll go back to my Visual Studio Code editor. Says return our image. Let me return my image. Let me return my image. Return my image. Go back to the default view. And as you note, my image is very, very large. I have to scroll to the far right in order to see the entire image. So we want to showcase flexible images. And how do you do that? How do you do that? For flexible images, I'll go back to my Visual Studio Code editor. I'll use an element selector. I will use an element selector. And I simply need to define the width of my image, also using relative units of measurement. For images, that one is specifically the percentage. For images, that is specifically the percentage. When you are using relative units, you can use the percentage. And for the height, I set the height to auto. So what this tool will do is simply resize the image on depending on the device screen width, the device screen width. So if it is small, the image will be resized automatically to match up the device screen width. And the beauty of this is it will retain the aspect ratio of the image. So your image does not end up looking like it was manually cropped or manually resized. So it retains the aspect ratio of that image. So we can save our file, save our CSS file, and then head on back to the browser. Head on back to the browser. And as you can see, my image now perfectly fits within the screen horizontally. Horizontally is from left to right. You see, I do not need to scroll. I do not need to scroll across. The image just fits perfectly. And now we can launch our device toolbar. You can launch your device toolbar and see how your image automatically resizes based on the width of the screen. How the image resizes based on the width of the screen. We set to 100. And there you have it. There you have it. There you have it. So having this knowledge, now you can comfortably put your images and do not stress about how will they appear. Will it overflow? Will it overflow? Will it go beyond the structures and the layouts I have defined? No, you do not need to worry anymore about that. You can simply introduce the concept of flexible images, and your images will automatically be resized according to the device screen width. Okay? Next, we can have a look at media queries. We can have a look at media queries. So let us finish with the concepts and then I will welcome your questions. I will welcome your questions once we are through with the media queries. There's a certain question I asked the afternoon class. I think I'm going to ask you. So let me get let me get another image. Let me get another image. Mhm. Get another image. Yeah, this one. Get another image and then place it somewhere. And I want you to tell me what will happen to this image. I want you to tell me what will happen to that image. Okay. So, on the chat box, I want you to tell me what will happen to that image. This image is somebody has already answered. It won't show. It will overflow. It will overlap. Anyone else? Anyone else? Babatunde. Babatunde says it will maintain the width of the container. Overflow. It will cover the other one. It will appear inside the container. You see the description and not the image. Fail to load. It will show picture of lake in words. It will not appear. It will take the 80% of the parent width. Okay, thank you. Let us see. Let us see. Let us see who is right. Let us see. Let us see. Where are my naysayers? Where are my naysayers? It will not appear. Why were you saying it will not appear? And who was saying it will overlap? Huh? Who was saying it will not resize? It will fail to load. Take up the whole page. So the first correct answer was from Babatunde. Maybe you can raise your hand and explain to us why. Babatunde, I want you to raise your hand and explain to the class why. Babatunde, yes. Yeah, thank you. Can you explain to us why?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Oh, good evening.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello. We can't hear you. I think something wrong with your mic.
Oh, well, now can you hear me now?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
All right. So the reason it's maintaining the width of the container is because the container itself, the width has been set to 80% margin left. So the image will inherit the settings for the container when you upload it there.
Very, very, very nice. A round of applause to Babatunde. That was spot on, spot on. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. That was spot on. Yeah, did you hear that? Did you hear that? You guys have not been following. Huh? You have not been following. You have not been following. That is very, very good. Very, very good, Babatunde. So the reason why this is not covering the entire page is because one, we have placed the image within the div container. And number two, the div container already has a set width. So anything that appears inside it cannot go beyond the size that has already been defined for it. Okay? So that is the reason. That is the reason. Very, very good, Babatunde. That is exceptional. Very nice, very nice. So I hope you've had that explanation. The reason why is because the container already has a set width. Consider a house, or let's not use a house. Let's consider a container that holds water. If it is meant to hold 500 ml, it will always just hold 500 ml and nothing more. So if you try and shove something more into it, what will happen? It will not fit. Okay. So what is happening here is the image now needs to conform to the space that it has been provided with. It needs to conform to that space. And because the maximum space it is conformed to is only 80%, that is what the image will expand to. Only 80% that has been already defined. Very nice. Very, very nice. Okay. Very nice. I wonder why people are saying it will not show. I think because I went to the next slide for my source attribute. This is still valid. This is still a valid piece way of writing HTML code, while spanning the next line. I think that was what threw people off. Yeah. When I went to the next line for the source attribute and the alt attribute. Okay, very good, very good. So where were we? Where were we? Flexible images. We are off to media queries, media queries, media queries, media queries. So with media queries, what do I want us to do? In the media queries, with the media query, what do I want us to do? I want us to let me see. Let me have a look. Let me have a look at what we have. I want us to change the background color of our div container. I want us to change the background color of the div container with the media query. What else can we change? We can hide the images. We can hide the images. Yeah, let us do those two things. Change the background color of our media queries. Maybe increase the font size. Maybe increase the font size. Okay. Yeah. So we can do that. Okay, so media query. So our media query, I want our media query to apply to anything that is smaller than 100 pixels. I want it to apply to anything that is smaller than 600 pixels. 600 pixels is just the default size that we take for any mobile device. 600 pixels. Anything smaller than that, we consider that a mobile device. So I want us, we said we want to change the background color for our div. We want to change the background color for our div. So first of all, we change the width to 100%. Change the width to 100%, and then background color. Let me get something opposite, so we can do light green. I want to change that to light green. I want to hide the images. So for this one, I'll say display none. I want to hide those images. So for the font, I want to change the font size. I want to change the font size. So let me ensure my website is in the default. Okay, so that is what we have. That is what we have. So we'll go to our device toolbar. We'll go to our device toolbar. Remember, right click, select inspect, right click, select inspect to open the developer tools, and then select the device toolbar. So I want you to pay close attention to, I want you to pay close attention to the display. When I change this to 600 pixels. What has happened? What has happened? What has happened? So because we defined a media query, we simply asked the browser. We requested information from the browser. And the condition that we are checking, or the aspect we are checking, is the maximum width. And our maximum width is set to 600 pixels. And what happens when the maximum width is set to 600 pixels? One, we will reset our container width to 100%. We reset our container width to 100%. Why is the margin left still working? To reset it. Yeah. We reset our container width to 100%, margin set to 0, so that it can span the entire width. And then we change the background color. It was coral, now it is light sea green. And for the images, I am simply hiding them. I do not want them to show if somebody is accessing this from a mobile device. And for the font size, I change that to 1.5 EM. EM is also another unit of measurement. That one is a relative one. It's not absolute. Okay. So with that knowledge of media queries, you see, you can define different interfaces based on conditions on the different aspects of a device, such as the screen size, the resolution, the orientation, and so on and so forth. And our condition is dependent on 600 pixels. The moment I add even just a single digit, then that one changes back to my original. That one changes back to my original. That is the beauty and the power of media queries. The beauty and the power of media queries. So let me just open the chat box, invite your questions as I push this to a repository, and share the code with you. Any question, please post it on the chat box. Five, four, session 3. Yeah, so let me pause the chat for a bit as I go through your questions. In the meantime, that is the link to the repository. So Nicole is asking, is it okay to write height as a percentage, but width as using pixel and vice versa? So my response to that would be, it all boils down to what you want to achieve. Remember, when you introduce pixels, when you are doing sizes, either width or height, you're introducing an absolute value. And currently, that is what we are trying to avoid, absolute values. We are trying to avoid absolute values so that we can enable that fluid and flexible movement of the different elements. So what is it that you want to achieve? If you feel that absolute values are the way to go, then go for it. but you'd have limitations when it comes to responsive web design. That is why we have introduced relative units of measurement, such as the percentage. Okay. Mm, what web app or app are you using? Is that question directed to me? uh, I'm not sure how to answer that one. I'm not sure how to answer that one. So when it comes to responsiveness, Lester is asking, should every element be responsive with the page? When it comes to responsiveness, there are some main elements that you want to be responsive, like containers and images. Those are things that take up space on your web pages. So the moment a screen size reduces or the moment a screen size increases, there are elements that definitely you would want to scale up or scale down, okay? So you do not have to have everything responsive, but the most important bits, the bits that would make the page look somehow if they are not responsive. Things like images, things like tables and forms. Those large elements that affect the structure and layout of your web pages. Those ones are the most important that you need to consider when you are doing your responsiveness. Um, body query. Body, this is an element selector, and we're simply changing the font size. So any font that appears within the body, that will be the new size for devices with a max width of 600 pixels. Difference between max width and minimum width. I think the name just describes the difference. Maximum and minimum. Or you need a definition for that one. I think that one is self-explanatory. Yeah? And to the pictures to be changing every minute. You need to introduce JavaScript for that. Okay. Any other question? Any other question? Okay. Let me pause this, go through these questions. I've already shared the repository. How was your code autofilling? How's my code autofilling? Look for these extensions. There's an extension for HTML, there's an extension for CSS, and so on and so forth. Yeah, shown here. What is the difference between M and REM and which one to use and where? Okay. EM refers to the relative size, the size relative to the font size of the element. Size relative to the font size, that is EM. REM, size relative to the root element's font size, that is the HTML element. So the font size that is defined for HTML, that is what will be used to define the relative size when you are using REM. When you're using EM, it uses the font size of the element to determine the size. So when and where to use them, it all boils down to what it is that you want to achieve. What it is you want to achieve. If you want something that will consider font size as a unit of measurement relative to what you want to resize, then you use EM. If you want to consider the root elements font size, then you use REM, okay? That is when and where you can use REM and EM. I have a Nicole who is asking the same question about mean width and max width. Okay, let me just give you the difference. I thought the name would give away the actual differences between the two. So mean width is simply you are setting the smallest width an element can be, the smallest width, whereas max width, you are setting the maximum width an element can be. So with mean width, this simply means the element won't shrink below that value that you have set. And with max width means the element will not grow or scale up beyond that value that you have set. So I guess I answered your question, David. And for Nicole, yes, they actually work. Why would they not work? Ali is asking how the media query works. I think we explained the media query, but we can go through it again. Media queries are used to identify certain aspects within your web page, not web page, within the device that is accessing the web page. So you identify and specify a certain aspect of that page and use that aspect in a condition in order to modify, in order to modify certain properties, certain CSS properties. So for our example, what we have done is we are simply checking the maximum device width that is set to 600 pixels. If this condition is met, If this condition tends to be true, then what will happen? On our class container, we are changing the width to 100%, margin, we are setting that to 0, and the background color, we are changing that to light sea green. For the images, we are simply hiding them, and on the body of our web page, we change the font size. So that is how media queries will work. Once this condition is met, then these changes will occur upon our web page. That is media query. How do I arrange my code like that? You simply use tab. It looks beautiful, eh? Yeah, yeah, it's good to arrange your code. If the relative measurements are already making the web page less responsive, what is the need of the media query? That is a very good question. What is the need of the media query? Nice, nice question. Nice question, nice question. Yeah, so the media queries come about when you want to employ different properties, when you want to change different properties from what you actually have, what you actually have. Remember, you're not just changing the relativeness of the relative positions of the different elements. Okay, you're not just changing that. And also, once you've defined a relative position as the default, let me just go back to the web page so that I can explain that much more clearly. So this was our default. This is what we had designed earlier. This is what we had designed earlier. So if media queries were absent, let me get rid of it first. If media queries were absent, and we view this on a mobile device, uh, let's say, how does this page look like? Does it look like, it doesn't look very neat because of this key space, this key space here, the space before our container and the space before the first image. It doesn't look very, very neat. So the reason why the media queries will not work every time, the relative positions will not work every time, is simply because of issues like this. You do not want this to be applied to devices with smaller screens. You do not want that. This does not look neat at all. So with mobile screens, you want such things to span the entire width of the page. And that is why we introduce media queries so that you can alter the way things look like on smaller screens to make them much more neater, make them much more presentable. That is the purpose of the media query. And some of your questions are very specific to what you have done on your on your on your own web page. They are very specific to what you have done on your own web pages. So I might not be able to adequately answer unless I can see the whole picture. Answering to something you've customized on your own becomes very, very difficult. I can only address something I can see. I have a complete picture of. Yes, you can do navbar menu using media queries for smaller screens. Yes. I think you've seen that when you access a website, the navbar is collapsed so such that you have something like a hamburger menu. When you click on that, it loads, it displays the entire navigation, but now it is usually stacked so that it is easier to see on a smaller screen. Mm. Segun is asking, when you start React, will there still be a need for media queries? First of all, React is a JavaScript. Is it a JavaScript framework or a JavaScript library? Oh, I was on mute the entire time. Oh, okay. Sorry, I lost my I lost my internet for a minute. So okay, so where were we? Where were we? Where were we? Oh, the question was um question was from Segun. When we start React, will there still be a need for media queries? Yes, there will still be a need for media queries. React is JavaScript and CSS is styling. The two do not correlate. Those are entirely different things. Yes, there will be a need for media queries. Why not? Um, John Paul is asking, when you set the relative position of the div container width to 100%, can you still apply your margin value? I would say yes and no. Yes, it can still be applicable, but it will beat the purpose of setting the width to 100%, because 100% will span the entire width from left to right. Why set 100% and then also do a margin? That beats the purpose of the earlier 100% that you had set. Geoffrey is asking, is there a way you can put media query for the whole website other than for each section? That is not the purpose of media queries. Remember, media queries are meant to modify the elements, the different elements, so that they can fit to the different device screen sizes. Huh? Okay, so you cannot set it for an entire page. You need to change it for the different elements so that they can fit to the screen size. Huh? And VW is view height and view width. They're just other relative units of measurement. They simply refer to the viewport. Viewport height, that is horizontally, and viewport width, that is, viewport height is vertically, sorry. Viewport width is horizontally. Can we have a look at layouts before we close the session? Let's have a look at layouts before we close this session. So when it comes to layouts, I think last week we went to, not last week, 2 weeks ago, we went through the CSS box layout, the CSS box layout, where we were playing around with margins, padding, borders, and content. Those four define the CSS box layout. So this particular week, we are going a notch higher, and we'll be looking at flexible layout, or the flex box, and also the CSS grid layout. Those are the two that we want to look at. Those are the two that we want to look at. Flexible box layout and the grid layout. So in the interest of time, we will do this practically, and then I can explain it line by line. So let us create a div. Let us create another container. I want you to create another container. I want you to create another container with the class of flex container. Flex container. And within this class, I want you to have 4 sub containers. with the class flex item. The class flex item. So the flex box, CSS flex box in full flexible box layout is a layout model that allows you to align, space, and distribute items within a container easily, even when the items sizes are dynamic, meaning they change depending on the content that has been displayed within them. So with the Flexbox, you're able to control that, the alignment, the spacing, and the distribution of those items within a container. So we want to showcase that. Using this simple example. So we have our flex container with four flex items. Open my style.css. Flexible box layout. Flexible box layout. So first things first is our flex container. And the first item would be the display property. You set that to flex. And what this does is this one activates the flex layout. This one activates the flex layout. It activates the flex box layout. Number two, we have justify content. And this one will place it at the center. We also have align items at the center. Justify content is used to align items horizontally. Its inverse is the align items. Align items is used to align items vertically. Justify content horizontally, align items vertically. That is the purpose of those. I'm going to use flex wrap. This property is used to move an item to the next line in the event that it does not fit on the line that we have defined our flexible box layout. So if an item does not fit on one line, then it automatically moves to the next line. We can put a height. Let us just put a height so that we can see a VH as someone has suggested. Then we can do a background color. Yeah, I think light blue is fine. Do a background color. Light blue is okay. Next, we have our flex items. So for our flex items, we can do a background. Let's do gray. And we can do padding, 20 pixels. We can set the flex to 1. So the flex property in this case, this one will enable the item to grow or shrink automatically based on the content that it has, based on the content that it has, so that these items will maintain a definite size. They will maintain a definite size on the flexible box container. So let me save that. Let me save that. And then I think we need some content. We need some content for our do lorem ipsum. Content. We have something. Save that. Go back to my browser. Go back to my browser. Let me use the default view. Oh, I missed one. I missed one. We need some space. We need some space. We need some space between our items. We need some space between our items. So there's a property called gap. You can set that to 10 pixels. We need some space. We need some space between our flex boxes. We need that space between our flex boxes. So that is how you define a flex box. That is how you define a flex box. And to see the fluid and responsiveness of the flex box, we can then go back to inspect. We can go back to inspect. We can go back to inspect. Let's do another phone here. The mini, okay. Yes, need something like that. Something like that. Something like that. Pro. Getting that is still fine. That is still fine. So as you can note, our flex box is living up to its name. It is flexible in nature. As you can see, the items are shrinking and growing depending on the screen size. They are shrinking and growing depending on the screen size. You can do a landscape. Let's go to an iPad. Yeah, you can do landscape. You can do portraits, and the flexible boxes will expand and shrink down according to the content and the space that is available to them. The content and the space that is available to them. So this is an enhancement on the fluid layout. This is an enhancement on the fluid layout, such that you now do not need to define the fluid layout for each container. You just define it once. You just define it once, or is this twice? You define it twice for the container and for the items within the container. And you will have such a layout. The problem with this layout is the fact that it is one-dimensional. It is only one-dimensional. You can only define it in a one-dimensional space, meaning that you can only define the sizes of, here we've defined the sizes of the columns, we've defined the sizes of the columns, yeah, I think, yeah, we've defined the sizes of the columns here only. That tends to limit you as a developer because you should have the flexibility to define sizes for both the rows and the columns. And that is where we introduce the CSS grid layout. The CSS grid layout. So I'll do another one. I'll do another one here. We'll do another one here for the CSS grid layout. So we have div, class. This will be grid container. Grid container. Don't worry, I will update the repository as soon as I'm done with this. In the interest of time, I just want to finish up on this one. Then I can update the repository and then take your questions. So for this one, I want 5 of them. I want 5 of them. So I came up with a sketch. I came up with a sketch on the earlier session of what I want to achieve. So consider this as a typical web page, and the layouts are divided in 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 being your header. I hope you can see my screen. 1 being the header, 2 being a sidebar, 3 being the main content, and 4 being another sidebar to the right. And then 5, we have our footer. So I want you to consider this layout, and I want us to create it using the CSS grid. Okay, so we have a div with the grid container. And for these ones, I'll have them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For this one, this will be my header. Can be my menu to the side. I have a main section. I can have a right section. And finally, this will be my footer. That can be my footer. So I'll save that. Head on back to my CSS. So for this one, this is grid layout. Grid layout. Start with the grid container. Grid container. First item, the display should be set to grid. So you notify the browser, we are doing a grid layout for this particular class. We are doing a grid layout. Next, we set the grid template. Grid template areas. Grid template areas. Yeah. Header. That would be my first area. For the second line, I have according to my design, according to the design I had showcased. The first one is the header. The second one, second section, I have menu, main, and right. So menu, main, and right. And finally, I have footer, footer, footer. Okay. To place a gap, Let's place a gap. So we see a distinction between those different columns and rows. And then just have padding, just had some. Now for the items, we have grid item. So for this one, we just do a grid area property. Grid area we defined at the top. That one is header. Can do a background color so that it is very distinct. That is one. We have 5 of them. Yeah, grid item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So grid item 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those are the classes. Item 2 is menu. Is right. Oh, main, sorry. 3 is main. 4 is right. And 5 is the footer. 5 is the footer. Again, to make the distinction, let us have different colors. Gray, have green, right. Right. Okay, so let me save that and then head on back to my browser. Go back to the default. Go back to the default. I hope you can see my grid layout at the bottom. The foot 5, sorry. The footer is item 5. Okay, much better. Yes, much better. So if you can see my screen, to get rid of this flex box, hindering my view. So if you can see my screen, I have been able to define the layout that I drew. Let me just also bring that one up. So this is the layout that I drew. This is the layout that I drew. And I've been able to translate it using the grid layout. So we have your header as number 1. We have your menu number 2. We have the main section number 3, the right section number 4. And finally, number 5, we have the footer. And now you should be able to populate these different sections with your content, with your different images to come up with this flexible, with this grid layout. And remember, you can also apply some media queries to this so that all of these can stack up one after the other when the screen size goes below a certain size. When the screen size goes below a certain size. Sorry. just showcase that media query real quick, and then we can call it a day. Simple as that. So that they stack one after the other. Hmm. This, I think, quite much better. So once I go to the device toolbar, uh, set this to responsive. Then it is, the flexbox is still too much, but you can still see the distinct nature of the grid box. Once the device width goes below 600 pixels, then the items stack up one against each other, so that you have something that is very, very neat when it comes to the display of your elements. When it comes to the display of your elements. With that, I come to the end of my session. I welcome any questions that you may have regarding what we have gone through. In the meantime, I will update the repository. I will update the repository for your benefit. Okay, good, 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 good. There is the repository link. That is the repository link. You'll forgive me, I haven't been able to upload the recordings for the first and second session, but they are ready. They are ready. Uh, just upload them while we speak. 2025. Okay. Your grid items look wrong. but the code is the same. Are you sure the code is the same? Are you sure the code is the same? I've shared the repo on the chat box. Okay, there it is again. Is position of a container by default relative or absolute? It is actually static. It is neither relative or absolute. It is actually static. Eh? Question. How do you differentiate use of div and section? It's a very good question, but I think Geoffrey has left. Div and section. Both are containers. Both are containers. Both are containers. They are block level elements, but they have different purposes. Um, so div is mainly a generic container. It is used for grouping content, and two, it has no semantic meaning. While section is a semantic level element. Um, so with the semantic level elements, these ones make the document more accessible, and they are better for search engine optimization and screen readers. But they basically just serve the same purpose. Eh? They just serve the same purpose. They're just used for grouping items together. Okay. Another question. My flex box is displaying block and I have given it flex. There's something you're missing. Just look at your code. Probably a syntax error. Eh? Probably a syntax error. Adding border radius to grid items. So you just define a border for the grid items. Eh? Just define a border, Nicole. Just define a border. You can define a border on in the CSS for the different grid items. Eh? You can define a border and specify the border radius. Okay, I hope that one is clear. Yeah, I don't want you reporting me to administration. I kept you here up to late hours. Uh, so I request to end the session there if there are no more questions. But in case there is a question, please feel free to ask. I do not want to lock you out. Tried it to each later. No quick way. Okay, so the reason why I have different classes for the grid items, I just wanted to showcase the differences, make the differences. Sorry. Um, where is this? I just wanted to see for you to see the distinction between the different grids. That is why I did a different class for each grid item. You can use one class, you can use one class for each grid, for all the grids, sorry. You can use one class for all the grids. Mine was just to pass across a point. I just wanted you to see the distinction between the different grid items in a grid layout, okay? So that is why I used different classes for the different grids. Otherwise, you can just as well just use one grid. You can use one class for the grid items and then specify all necessary styling that will be applied across all of the grid items. Okay, any other question? The images don't disappear. It's only that the space that you have, eh, or your developer tools are loading on a different page. You can actually dock them to the web page that you are working on. The images do not disappear. They're still there. The only reason why you cannot see the images is one, the developer tools. Um, the developer tools have opened an entirely new window. So you're only seeing this window for the developer tools, and this one has remained on the browser. Or two, this one is so much you cannot be able to see other left side of the browser. I've shared my repo more than 20 times. You're not copying it. Otherwise, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the amazing questions. You really made the class interactive. And I hope you got to learn something today. Please, please, please remember your assignments and your quizzes. They go into determining the award of your certificate. So please pay mind to them. They are very, very important. And also these sessions, do not miss a lot of these sessions. Remember, you need to at least attend 70% of the class sessions. That that one is a given for you to be considered for the awardment of a certificate. So please remember all those. Otherwise, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I wish you a very, very good night. We'll be seeing you next week when we will be handling JavaScript. We actually get to interact with JavaScript now. Get to see what it is. How can you use it in your website and web pages to add interactivity? Okay, so do have a very, very good night. I'm uploading video for session 1 and 2 immediately I log off, and then session 3 will be ready in the next hour. Otherwise, thank you so much and have a very, very good night.